the NCAA and state laws are about to clash over NIL deals. And Jaru, it's laughable because the NCAA is clearly just trying to maintain its credibility here, and I don't know how they're going to win. So here's what's basically happening. Many states have passed laws. Now, the NCAA has basically made it clear that specific type of NIL activities, NIL can't be affiliated with the schools, really, shouldn't be affiliated with the schools, and can't be used as recruiting tools. But many states have passed laws that allow for fundraising groups that are legally separate yet closely partnered with universities to start paying athletes for NIL endorsements. Texas has passed a law that basically just encourages people to start doing this. So in Texas, there's a law set to go into effect this Saturday, which is tomorrow, that would allow fundraising groups that support athletic departments to raise money for NIL deals. Yes, that's right. So you could literally set up a charity organization or some sort of nonprofit organization and raise money from fans for NIL deals. So basically people can donate money to these organizations that can be used to pay players. So if you want your school to win on Sunday, you can just donate money to this NIL deal. So the NCAA is coming in and trying to be like, you can't do that. And they were saying that the NCAA trumps state law. Texas has already basically been like, nah, son, Texas law trumps what you guys are doing. Not only that, the states are now passing laws prohibiting the NCAA from punishing the schools in those states for doing NIL stuff. This is hilarious. This is another step to just blatantly disregarding and discrediting the NCAA, Jaru. And I don't know how in the world the NCAA thinks they're going to be able to uphold its power or wield its, or wield its power, or I don't even know the phrase. I don't know how they're going to be able to show any sort of authority on this matter.
Well, I think the biggest problem with the NCAA is, NIL has been happening for 2 years now, and they're just now trying to control it. Like, you can't, it's a little late to come into the wild, wild west and try to put laws and regulations in. And the NCAA has lost all their credibility. Nobody takes the NCAA that serious anymore. So, I just don't understand what their goal is with this. Like, who are you going to be more afraid of, Calhoun, the NCAA or your state government?
Oh, obviously your state government. All day, every day. And the NCAA is going to be afraid of the state government, quite honestly.
And because the NCAA is not giving the universities any money. The universities are going to listen to who's giving them money. So why would a public school, like in the article, Texas or Texas A&M, listen to the NCAA and not the people who fund the university? It doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And it's so funny how behind the curve they are. We're talking about an organization that the NCAA fought NIL, and they lose in court we all knew they were going to lose in court, because there's just no way you could say they weren't violating labor laws that exist on the books right now with not letting players make money off their names. And then it comes through, and now they're trying to be like, okay, well, let's try to find a way until then they can't use it as a recruiting tool. Well, how are you going to stop that? Like, you can't retroactively come back and be like, okay, fine, NIL's here, but you can't use it as a recruiting tool. What they should have done is 10 years ago, set up a advertising collective for athletes to let them get paid, and then they'd be able to control it a little bit. But by fighting it the way they did, they're behind the curve, and your anger with NIL is not. Your anger at the NCAA shouldn't be for allowing NIL to exist. They had no control over that. Your anger should be them not getting out ahead of it to try to control it when they could have. And the idea that they're going to sit there and say that our law trumps state law. You know what you should do, NCAA? I'm going to quote Dave Chappelle on this. Remember when Dave Chappelle was like, you got a problem, you should sanction me with your army? Oh, wait a minute. That's right. You don't have an army. You got a problem with state governments, NCAA? You should send your police force in. Send your state troopers in. Oh, wait a minute. You don't have a police force. These state governments do. So maybe the state laws are going to trump the NCAA, and by trying to pick a fight with them, I think they're just further escalating their demise, quite honestly.
Well, yeah, because I don't think the state governments were ever enemies with the NCAA. Not to my knowledge did, the Texas state government and NCAA hate each other. But now the state government has no reason not to go after the NCAA, because they're blatantly saying that they want like the association has been clear and maintains, quote, that schools must adhere to NCAA legislation or policy when it conflicts with permissive state laws. What? Okay, so if they don't, what is the NCAA going to do?
Yeah.
They don't have any power. I mean, and if they do something, like let's say they find that Texas breaks NCAA legislation today. So what, in 4 years, are they going to make them vacate wins? It just doesn't. I mean, they don't work fast enough. They don't have any more credibility. I mean, this investigation with Tennessee is taking forever, and Jeremy Pruitt hasn't coached at Tennessee in 2 or 3 years at this point. Like it doesn't. I don't get it.
Yeah, I agree. It's laughable that they're taking this long in the investigation, and quite honestly, look, they're scared to dish out punishments now because they know they're trying to stay in business. And the more they dish out punishments, the more they escalate their demise with teams and conferences wanting to break off from them. Look, Rocky Top Tom, I get your problem. You think NIL is evil and you have a big issue with it. Here's my point, Rocky Top Tom. Your issue is with the Sherman Antitrust Act passed in the late 1890s or 1880s, I believe. Because the fact is, you can have a problem with it all day. But there is no way you can deny that not allowing NIL was a direct violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act. And in no other form of American life would that be allowed. It was illegal. It's illegal to operate an entity like the NCAA and tell people involved, tell the revenue generators that they, I guess you would say laborers, that they can't profit off their own name. There's no way you could sit there and say that's okay. I mean, you may prefer that, but it is against the law. It is a blatant violation of the law for not to have NIL. The NCAA was in violation of the law for 100 years. I mean, that's just a fact. And so you may not think NIL is ethical, but how do you stop it? The NCAA legally can't stop it. The Supreme Court straight up said, you guys can't stop this. You're not allowed to stop it. And now the NCAA is saying that you can't use NIL for recruiting. Again, it's laughable, Trevor. How are they going to stop NIL being used for recruiting?
I don't know. I mean, and technically, I'm 99% sure if you promise an NIL deal, it's okay. But if you give them the money is where the problem is. So you think like Jaden Rashada, where he was promised, what was it, 8 mil, 11 mil, something like that, if he signed to Florida. He was never given money beforehand. So technically there were no rules broken. But he was promised NIL money if he went to Florida. Now, I think NIL probably is not ethical. I do agree with Rocky Top Tom. I'm sure there's schools like we've heard, like the Florida Trust that was trying to give Jalen Rashada all that money. I'm sure those schools are not using it ethically or morally or following the rules. But I do think NIL is fair because these athletes are working more than 40 hours a week, working long hours, more than anybody else who has a real job, and they can't have a real job because they're practicing sports all the time. So it's fair for them to be able to make money off their name and make money off the fame and work they're putting in college. But the NCAA, even if they wanted to put regulations in, it's too late. They can't do anything. That's why you saw Danny White and Dondi Plowman and a bunch of officials from schools go to Congress because that's where they're going to get regulations, not the NCAA, which knowing Congress is sad to think that they're relying on Congress to pass laws to govern college sports and not the body that's supposed to do it.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. And I think Congress should regulate sports betting. They should stay out of NIL. Honestly, they should stay out of it because I'm fine with the Wild West in NIL. And I will say this, if you're a Tennessee fan, you should be fine with it too, because we've covered recruiting enough, Jaru, and I'm sure you know, and I want to point this out before we go because it kind of ties into what we're talking about. Tennessee is not in terms of recruiting versus expectations. Guys, Tennessee's not a top 10 job. The high school football in the state is not that good, and it's really there's a reason they've only won one national championship in the past 70 years. And it's because Alabama was on probation and Georgia was terrible at the time. Tennessee can't consistently be great when Georgia's great and Alabama's great, except for NIL. except for NIL, because Tennessee has the largest NIL collective in the country, so they can go out and buy players, and that's how they get competitive with Alabama and Georgia. And just so people are aware, Spyre Sports Group, which is affiliated with Tennessee, is the most ambitious NIL collective in the nation right now. That was another on-through report that came out yesterday. So just so you guys, Tennessee's is number 1, Texas A&M number 2, Oregon number 3, Texas number 4, Miami number 5, Florida State number 6, USC number 7, Arkansas number 8, Ole Miss number 9, and West Virginia number 10. Now, Jaru, what's really, really funny about that is, okay, I'm going to, so Mr. Jones, you're right. Tennessee can recruit national, but recruiting national is not as yes, just being a national program to recruit is not the same thing as being able to recruit in your backyard an elite amount of talent. Georgia and Alabama can recruit all over too, but then they can stay in their backyard and load up on talent. Look, this is borne out in fact, guys. I'm sorry. Tennessee has won national title in the last 7 years, and it took Georgia having the worst coach in history, and Ray Goff maybe, and Alabama being on probation, and also Clemson and South Carolina not being arrived. You can't. It's really hard to do that. Tennessee's, and you're bringing up Heupel making it look easy. Yes, because of NIL. NIL is the neutralizer for Tennessee. That's how they compete on the level of Georgia and Alabama. But what I was going to point out was that Jaru last year. So you're going to find this hilarious. Florida's not in the top 20 list on all 3. Last year, the report on the most ambitious NIL collectives, Florida was in the top 5. But a month before, we were hearing reports that they were struggling to put it together. And now they're not in the top 20. What we're realizing is that Florida scrambled an NIL collective together and didn't really have all their ducks in a row. And now they've gotten exposed for it.
Yeah, and I mean that's what happens when your group is not governed correctly, or I mean that's the Wild Wild West. Like the groups who put their own rules in place and run it correctly will succeed. In Florida, like we saw with Jalen Rashada, with their kind of thrown together group, will not. And it's funny, as we're talking about this, at 11:01 a.m., the Volunteer Club, which is Tennessee's NIL, powered by Spyre Sports, announced that the Volunteer Club is excited to share its partnership with the University of Tennessee Athletics. So the Vol Club exists to create sustainable NIL opportunities for our student athletes, as well as create a community of passionate Vol fans through experiences, events, content, merchandise, and more. This partnership is a win-win for all Tennessee fans. Look for the Vol Club this fall during football season.
So Tennessee and the Texas schools are flipping the middle finger to the NCAA right now. And you guys think the NCAA is going to be able to come down on them? It ain't happening. Isn't this a giant middle finger after the NCAA? The NCAA sent this warning this week that you can't do this. And then Tennessee's like, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do it.
Yeah, I mean, what do they expect the NCAA to do? They don't have any real power at this point. Only if you think about like postseasons, the NCAA only really sponsors March Madness, I think. Or is it the NIT? They only sponsor one of them, and it's not like real, because the NCAA is not the college football playoff. Like, football teams could operate outside of the NCAA and still do the college football playoff realistically.
Yep. No, you're right. And that's probably what's going to happen, because I'm pretty sure the conferences are going to form their own, or the conferences are going to break away and form their own. You're going to see the SEC and the Big Ten and maybe one other Power 5 conference that cobbles together whatever teams are left over from the Pac-12, the ACC, and the Big 12. And it's going to be 3 conferences and 40 to 50 teams. And that's just going to be the way it goes. Now, I will say, Rocky Top Tom, you think you can convince me to not support NIL? You probably can't, but I will say that I'm not crazy about the conferences getting so big, and I'm not crazy about the whole, what I think is going to happen, which is 50 teams in one league and a 12-team playoff. I think college football was at its best with the bowl system and things being nationwide, but I accept that that's changing.